All right, and we are back here on the GSMC football podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we will now get into talking about the Jaguars Texans game. Jaguars losing a tough game here, 24-20. And we also have Anthony Manzano in the chat, a show regular. He says, what's your opinions on that interview that Deion Sanders did with Shannon Sharp and Chad Johnson on their podcast, saying that the only team he would want his son to be drafted by was the Dolphins? I did not actually get a chance to see that, so I'll have to. Well, I saw other clips from that interview, but it had nothing to do with football. It had to do with something else. But, and he also said, and does Deion really have the amount of power to control where his son lands in the draft? Well, I mean, look at what happened with Eli Manning when he was drafted, by the Chargers. They didn't want him getting drafted by them, and they ended up doing a swap with him and Phillip Rivers. It was Archie Manning did not want Eli to get drafted by the Chargers either. And, well, I don't really know if it was really Eli per se. I think it was more of his dad. But yeah, they kind of forced Eli out of being the Chargers quarterback, and they did that swap with the Giants to get Eli, and Phillip Rivers ended up going to the Chargers. So, I mean, Deion's probably got some power there. And the other thing, too, is, I mean, we still got to see if the Dolphins are going to, what the Dolphins are going to end up doing. Because Tua's probably coming back. And we did have this discussion in our production meeting, and I'll probably hold off on this until next week. But if you're the Dolphins and you have a top 3 pick, are you taking a quarterback there? Even with Tua, after just paying him. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, I do think Deion has some power, but we'll see. Anyways, let's get to this game now. So the Jaguars and the Texans. The Jaguars, right now, they are the only winless team in the NFL. And I don't think many people would have thought that would be the case up until this point. I think there were some other teams that you could probably point to and say, yeah, that team would be winless at this point. But they are the only winless team in the NFL, and I made sure to double check. And they are. And they actually did play probably their best game of the season. Even though, some of the stats in this game may not tell you that. Like, Trevor Lawrence only threw for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns. He went 18 of 33. But the Jags did run the football well. Tank Bigsby had 90 yards on the ground. Travis Etienne, 50 yards on the ground. The Jaguars in total ran the ball for 158 yards. Brian Thomas Jr. looks like a really good player for this team. Rookie wide receiver out of LSU. 6 receptions for 86 yards and a touchdown. Christian Kirk had 7 for 61 and a touchdown. Jaguars defense, only 2 sacks in this game. One by Roy Robertson Harris, and the other by Jeremiah Ledbetter. None from Armstead, none from the other Josh Hines Allen. Yeah, I mean, they've just been very disappointing. But let's kind of go through it. So the Jaguars, they punted on their first possession. However, Steven Sims, I believe this was like his second muffed punt of the year. Because he muffed it before. So he muffed it. I believe he muffed it in another game. I could be wrong, though. Maybe it was just this game. But anyways, so he muffs the punt. Jaguars turn that into a touchdown immediately. Lawrence connects with Brian Thomas Jr. for a touchdown. And that was great. I was like, okay, Jags got off to a good start. But then the Texans, they answered right away, going 9 plays, 70 yards down the field. Stephon Diggs, it looked like he was going to try to throw it, but he ended up taking it in for a 6-yard touchdown, and that tied the game. However, the Jaguars did respond. Cam Little, their rookie kicker, 41-yard field goal to make it 10-7. Both teams punted. Then in the second quarter, Texans took the ball down the field. Almost 7.5 minutes of time of possession. And that resulted in a C.J.Stroud, Nico Collins 3-yard touchdown pass to make it 14-10. Jaguars kicked another field goal to make it 14-13. Cam Little from 52 yards out. And then the Jaguars, they kicked a field goal of their own. This was a Kaimi Fairbairn 30-yard field goal. So it was 17-13 at the half. So the Jaguars still in striking distance of this game. Then to open up the second half, both teams exchanged punts. Then the Jaguars, they took the ball, went 7 plays, 74 yards, 4 minutes of time of possession. 32-yard pass play by Trevor Lawrence connecting with Brian Thomas Jr. And then later in that drive from the Houston 8, Trevor Lawrence connects with Christian Kirk for an 8-yard touchdown to make it 20-17. But the Jaguars, they were not able to put the Texans away in this game. So they turned it over on downs. It was 4th and goal at the Houston 1-yard line. And Trevor Lawrence was not able to score. They stuffed him. And I mean, I get it. I get the aggressiveness, but, you know, maybe you go for the points there. I mean, they were up, you know, they were up 20-17. You can make it, you know, a touchdown game. I mean, I know the Texans, if they score a touchdown, which they ultimately did, they'd be up by a point, but I don't know. I feel like maybe you take the points there. But I could be wrong. I mean, that's an argument that you could, you know, make the argument for both sides, but I don't know. The way things have been going for the Jaguars, you know, put yourself up by a touchdown. But, you know what, the defense, you know, was doing a good job. I mean, the Texans were punting, and then it was really that last possession of the game, you know, and there was 18 seconds left. The Texans went 9 plays, 69 yards, 2.5 minutes of time possession down the field, and Stroud connected with Dare Ungabuwale, one of the running backs. I mean, you know, they're already down Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce. He scored a touchdown on 2nd and goal from 1 yard out. And the Texans ultimately ended up winning. Tough loss for the Jaguars. I mean, again, this was probably the best game that they've played so far this year. And, you know, they still ended up losing. Texans improved to 3-1. C.J.Stroud went 27-40, 345 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Texans ran the ball for 101 yards. Cam Akers, 53 yards on the ground. We'll see if they end up getting Joe Mixon back this week. That would be huge for this team. Nico Collins has gotten off to a great start. On the year, he has 30 receptions for 489 yards and 2 touchdowns. In this game, he was targeted 15 times, 12 receptions for 151 yards and a touchdown. Stephon Diggs, 9 targets, 5 receptions for 69 yards. Ungabuwale had 4 receptions for 47 yards and a touchdown. Dalton Schultz had 3 for 34. Steven Sims, a fumble in this game, and that you know, they're fortunate that they won that game because that could have made a big difference. Texans defense only had 1 sack in the game, so you know, the Jaguars at least were able to, you know, somewhat protect Trevor Lawrence in this game because that's been a problem so far this year. But it didn't really matter. They still ended up losing. And you know, you kind of look back at these games. I mean, other than the Bills game, the other 3 games were winnable. Like, you were up against the Dolphins by multiple scores. You probably should have won that game. You know, the Browns, you only lost by 5 points. That was at home. Could have won that game. And then you had the opportunity to win in Houston, and they couldn't do that. So they fall to 0-4, and they got the Colts next. Then they're visiting the Bears. They're home against the Patriots, home against the Packers, at the Eagles on Sunday Night Football. I have a feeling that game could be flexed out if the Jaguars only have like 2 wins at that point, if they can even get a win. The Vikings at home, at the Lions. Yeah, they got some tough games on that schedule. That stretch between the Packers and the Lions from week 8 to week 11, that could really bury them. The Colts, I think, is a winnable game. And it's at home. Let's see what happens. But, yeah, it's not looking good right now. Not looking good right now for the Jags. It just continues this season continues to spiral out of control for them. And again, they didn't play a bad game. It's just it didn't amount to a win. So, and then for the Texans, I'll be honest, like I was very high on the Texans going into this year, and this team is still very good. But to be honest, I mean, I got to be honest here. They really haven't been overly impressive. You know, week 1 they beat the Colts, and the Colts are kind of an inconsistent team. Then week 2 you beat the Bears, but you only beat them by 6 points. I mean, if Cam Akers doesn't fumble at the one, they win by multiple scores. But that game should not have been that close. Although the Bears do have a good defense, I gotta give them credit. They have a very good defense. And Caleb Williams, that was his second career game. But I think the Texans should have won by more than 6 points. They got shellacked by the Vikings, and then you beat the Jaguars, and it took till it got down to less than a minute in the game for you to take the lead and ultimately win. A team that's been playing bad. So I haven't really been that impressed with them so far. I was impressed with their Week 1 victory, but then after some of these games, I'm like, some of these teams. I mean, the Bears, they should have won by multiple scores, like I said, but the Vikings was like a true test, and they got blown out. And when they go up against some of these teams, like the Bills on Sunday, that's really going to show me what this team is made of. And I think they'll play well. I think this is going to be one of the best games of the weekend, and that's going to be one of the games I preview tomorrow. That's a true test. But when you go up against them, when you go up against the Ravens and the Chiefs later in the year, that's really going to show me what you're made of. So, and obviously they don't have the full complement of weapons. Joe Mixon is still out. Hopefully he's back this week, but already he didn't practice, so odds are maybe he's leaning toward where it's trending towards him not playing, which would be a big loss. But yeah, they haven't been overly impressive, but they're 3-1. They're a good team, and right now they're in the driver's seat to win this division. So, but let me know what you guys think about this game, or some of your takeaways from it. Jaguars, they are just hoping that they can get in that win column at some point. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about the Bears and their 24-18 victory over the Rams, and that is what will finish up, how we will finish up the show for today. So for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.